Welcome back to the Following Films podcast, where we dive into the art, craft, and passion behind the movies, and everything that inspires them. I'm your host, Chris Maynard, and today I'm bringing you an interview recorded at this year's Tucson Comic Book Convention. My guest today is a true legend in the world of comic art, Bill Morrison. You might know Bill as the co-founder of Bongo Comics, the longtime home of the Simpsons and Futurama in print. He's also worked as an illustrator for Disney Classics, served as the executive editor for Mad Magazine, and created his own acclaimed series like Roswell, Little Green Man, and Dead Vengeance. In our conversation, Bill shares stories from his journey through animation, comics, and publishing, from working alongside Matt Groening to reimagining the Beatles' Yellow Submarine as a graphic novel. We also discuss the evolution of humor, satire, and storytelling, in an era where pop culture is more self-aware than ever. Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Google Workspace. We keep things running smoothly and efficiently at Following Films with the convenience of cloud-based Google Workspace programs. You should try it and see how it can benefit your business as well. If you sign up using my link, I can give you a discount, and it helps to support the show. Check the show notes for a direct link. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Bill. Thanks.
Enjoy the show.
Thanks. So how are you?
I'm good. Is this close enough?
That's it. You're good. It's perfect. Thank you for taking the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So the first thing I got to ask you about, when I was looking over your career, it's hard not to notice you've been involved in pre-existing properties several times.
Yes.
Pretty much from the beginning all the way up until taking on one of my favorites, Mad Magazine, because that meant the world to me when I was a kid. That kind of unlocked satire for me when I was in third grade. I'm not sure. Did you have okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you take that on, the responsibility of shepherding these projects that are just iconic, and not only to culture at large, but to you personally?
I have this weird, I don't know if you call it a superpower, but like if I get asked to do something, the gravity of it never occurs to me immediately. Like it comes later.
Okay.
So somebody says, hey, do you want to write and draw an adaptation of the Beatles Yellow Submarine?
Exactly.
And I'm like, yes, I want to do that. That'd be great. That sounds like fun. And so I agree to it. And then after the initial conversation, it dawns on me that, this is going to be read by Beatles fans all over the world.
Yeah.
Same with Mad Magazine. It was, you don't think at first about the reaction and what it is that you're going to do and how people are going to accept that or perceive it. But once that does sink in, it's a little panic-inducing.
Who's scarier, the Mad Magazine Alfred E. Newman heads or the Beatles heads?
I think Mad Magazine was scarier.
Okay.
Because with the Beatles, with that project, I knew I was doing an adaptation of a classic animated film.
Yep.
And I knew that I wanted it to be faithful to the film. As a Beatles fan myself and a fan of the film, I'm not thinking, oh, I'm going to show everybody my version of the Yellow Submarine, how I would have done it. It's like, nobody wants that. They want, they want it to look like the film. And the thing that panicked me about that after the phone call was, I kind of stopped and I thought, wait a minute, who's going to want to see, the best thing about that film is the music and the animation.
Agreed.
My version of it will have neither of those things. So what can I bring to it without reimagining it and doing something stupid that will make people want to read it? Why wouldn't you just want to put in the video?
Right.
Why would you want to look at this book? So I started thinking about when I was a teenager, I would have blacklight posters on my walls and my brother before me, psychedelic
of course
artwork and stuff. And I loved Peter Max as a kid.
Yeah.
And I started thinking that's something that the film can't do. The film can't utilize graphic design the way a book can.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to, try to make every page look like a psychedelic poster as much as I can without getting in the way of the story.
Sure.
So that's what I did. And by the end, I felt pleased with it. And so as a Beatles fan, I thought, stepping away from, me as an artist, I started thinking, okay, if I can just think of myself as a Beatles fan looking at this and I like it, I'm happy with it, then I'm reasonably sure that other Beatles fans will accept it.
Well, there's the way that for me, my memory works, even when I think about a film or piece of animation, anything like that, it's always in still images that I think of. There's almost, my favorite things are encapsulated by a single shot usually.
Yeah.
And so you're able to do that and really just take these moments and hyper focus on one element of that. And I think that that's something that can be really powerful for people that are familiar with the film as well as the album. And you can it's not unlike you smell something that reminds you of that meal your mom used to cook when you were a kid, and it just unlocks those memories.
Yeah.
So do you have a similar experience, or what's the thing that triggers memory for you, do you think?
Smell definitely does. But yeah, I'll see things, toy packaging, I've never really tried to, analyze it, but just stuff from my childhood will instantly bring back, like, for example, that this isn't from my childhood, but when I was painting Disney posters.
Yeah.
I can look at those posters and I can remember, working at the studio, what was on the television when I was working on The Mermaid's Tale.
Yeah.
An episode of David Letterman that we were watching, or a Beach Boys album that we had on, yeah, it's weird. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but for some reason there are certain little things that I'll look at from my history, pieces of art that I've done, and I'll be able to remember like other sensory things that were happening while I was doing it.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. It's the reason that I collect things. It's not even that I'm going to revisit them necessarily. I have several thousand movies, and it's when I go through and I look at the spine, I get that charge of the memory when I see it. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of things I own that I'll never view again. But when I go through and see it, I get that little thing that hits again for me.
Yeah.
So, and it can be something like, when I look at like something from Harryhausen, and it takes me back to my dad showing me those films when I was a kid and those kinds of things. So and
that's
then
really strong.
I love it. Then what about, how did your collaboration with The Simpsons come together for you?
Well, when I first, my first job in Hollywood was working in movie advertising. So the week I was hired, there was a young art director that was also hired, and she was friends with Matt Groening. And this is before The Simpsons. So she suggested Matt as somebody who could write copy for movie posters. So I would see him, I got to know him a little bit then, and I would see him in the halls whenever he would come in to view a film that he was going to write poster copy for. And so I knew him through that. And more importantly, I knew Millie Smythe, who was his art director friend. So she left the agency where we worked, and then I left maybe a year after that. And I was working at a studio in Glendale where I was doing all the Disney posters. And I got a call from her one day early in 1990, and I hadn't talked to her in like 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years. And she said, do you remember Matt Groening? And I was like, yeah, of course, still read Life in Hell. And she said, well, he's got a show on Fox called The Simpsons that just started. And that was back when you could say that and people wouldn't laugh because not everybody knew about it.
Is this when it was Tracy Ullman associated, or is this just after that?
Yeah, this was right after the Christmas episode.
Got it.
And then like in February of 90, I think, they started the weekly series. So I think it had been on like 3 weeks. And I said, oh yeah, I've watched it since Tracy Ullman, and I've been watching the new series. And she said, well, Matt's put me in charge of all the merchandise art. So I have to do approvals on all the art, but I also have to recruit artists. And she said, I remember that you used to draw cartoons in your downtime, and I was wondering if you'd like to take a stab at drawing the Simpsons for merchandise. So I went over to her studio, and I did like a little tryout, and she gave me a couple of jobs, and Fox liked what I was doing, so there was like a flood of freelance jobs. So this is while I'm still working at the studio doing the Disney posters and other stuff. It got to the point where I actually went to my boss, David Willardson, who owned the studio, and I said, I've been moonlighting doing the Simpsons stuff, but they keep throwing jobs at me, and I have to keep saying no because there's just too much. So I was thinking, what if I brought those into the studio, and then I could oversee them, bring in some other artists, and you'll make money. I won't feel guilty because moonlighting. And he said, great. So for a couple of months, we did that. And then I got invited to Millie's wedding. Mm-hmm. So I'm in the receiving line. She's in her wedding dress. And the minute she sees me, she takes my hand and she goes, Matt Groening's lawyer's here, and she wants to see you. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? So
at her own wedding.
Yeah, she just like leaves the receiving lines and drags me by the hand. And so I meet this woman, Susan Grode, and she said, we've been hearing good things about the work you're doing, and Fox would like to hire you full time. So, let me know what it would cost for you to do that. And if you're interested, and, just let me know. So, thought about it, gave her a number. Fox said yes. There was no negotiation, so I probably lowballed myself. So then I was working for Fox full time. And 2 days a week, I was following Millie around at Fox doing approvals.
Okay.
So I was learning her job because there was so much Simpsons stuff coming out.
That merchandise train was huge.
It was amazing.
It was insane for those first couple of years.
And so they needed someone to help her, and that was part of the reason why I was hired. And then the other 3 days, I was overseeing artists at the animation studio we were in a very small room just doing art for merchandise. So there were like 3 of us, but I was overseeing and kind of trafficking the art and that kind of thing. But then Matt Groening, when I found out when he made his deal with Fox, his lawyer retained all the publishing rights. So I started working on publishing projects on the side that weren't connected to my Fox job. And some of those were books, some were calendars, but one was a magazine called Simpsons Illustrated. And that's where we started doing comics. So we had a comic section in the magazine, and then that led to, over the course of 2 years, a one-shot comic, which gave Matt the confidence to start Bongo. But that's how I got started, and I'd always wanted to be a comic artist as a kid.
Right.
And I didn't end up going that way. That's a whole other story.
You kind of ended up through a back loophole, kind of backwards way in through advertising, commercial art, and then coming in and finding the thing that you loved all along.
Right.
So.
Back then, you had to go to New York to get your start as a comic artist. And I was terrified of New York, even though I grew up in the murder capital of the world.
You're Detroit? Okay, yeah.
But, too many Martin Scorsese movies and 70s cop shows, So it's like, oh, New York, it's a terrible place. You'll never survive. So I didn't want to go to New York, which is why I ended up out in California.
Sure.
And I just leaned into it. When I was in art school, I had a teacher who taught airbrush, and he was really into the whole California airbrush look that was happening in the 70s and 80s. And it was cool. It was glitzy and glamorous, and I took to it. And I thought, well, I can do this. This will be fun. I'll be an illustrator, And I kind of left the comic dream behind. And then, one thing leads to another, know the right people. And, next thing I know, I'm writing and drawing comics. People always ask me, like, how do you get your start in comics? And I always say, don't do it the way I did it. Because it's rolling the dice, if you do that.
Well, probably the vast majority of people who have their jobs, they knew somebody.
Mm-hmm.
It's most of us, we meet somebody, then you grow up together, you meet them in your 20s, your 30s, and then they just happen to go into this thing, and it's like, oh, I know somebody. And that's just how you end up.
Yeah, it's networking, connections, and you have to have the ability and what they're looking for. But,
of course.
Well, not always. Sometimes there's nepotism and cronyism.
But at some point, yeah. But it's not always the most talented artist that rises to the top. There are, sometimes it's just the old adage of life is too short to work with assholes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a person that you can work with them, you're going to get along with them, and all things being equal, and might as well go with somebody that I'm going to enjoy working with.
Right.
So, but you ended up tying those kind of two things together with the Beatles. You did that Yellow album. And then,
the Yellow Submarine adaptation.
Exactly. And then, but there was the image that was traced in pop art.
Oh, the Yellow album, the Simpsons Yellow album.
And I love pop art. I really do. I have a deep appreciation for Warhol and Shepard and everything in between. But there's a point where it doesn't really strike as art to me.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a level, like with Mad Magazine, of satire or parody on some level.
Yeah.
And that did not strike me as parody or satire. It's literally just tracing and putting X's. I did not understand that. So.
I didn't either. And when that whole thing came out, it was mainly because the piece sold for almost $15 million.
Exactly.
Like, nobody really would have cared about it. It wouldn't have been on my radar.
No.
Because people do knockoffs of stuff that I've done. I don't want to say all the time, but I've seen it. And it's like, okay, whatever.
It's one of the few things I can draw is Bart. So, that's one of the handful.
But when that thing sold for almost $15 million, people are sending me articles, and a lot of people wanted me to be, like, really angry about it and sue. Like, are you going to sue? People are asking me, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a lawyer?
Right.
Like, well, first of all, I don't own that image. It's owned by Fox.
Right.
Now Disney. So if anybody's going to sue, it's them. And it's not like I get royalties from the image, so it's not taking money out of my pocket. The thing that I found most annoying was not so much that the artist did that and, sold it as artwork. The thing that was most annoying was when journalists wrote about it, they said that he was doing a parody of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album. That they cut my involvement and the Simpsons involvement out completely. So they made it look like it was his idea to use the Simpsons in place of the Beatles. Instead of just directly copying what you had already done. Yeah. Wow. And the real idea for that album cover goes to Steve Vance. He was my art director on that project. Right. So it was his idea to do a parody of the Sgt. Pepper cover with the Simpsons characters. And taking each one of the characters and contextualizing, you're saying, okay, who is going to be the equivalent of Muhammad Ali and this and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, okay. And he did the Krusty doll in the corner that says welcome Ren and Stimpy instead of welcome Rolling Stones. Which is great. That was all Steve. And, I was like, I'm not really mad. I'm annoyed, but it's really being annoyed at journalists who didn't do their research. They just assumed that Cause was doing a direct parody of the Sgt. Pepper cover when he was just doing a trace off with a few alterations of the piece that we did.
because you could see without that context that taking these two things from pop culture and mixing them together and marrying them could be something that you would say. And then that would be proper satire. But at that point, you're removing that middle piece of combining the two. You're not adding anything to it.
And the satire of it was, this was the Simpsons' second record album, with songs, original songs. We did Simpsons Sing the Blues, and then it was followed up by the Yellow Album. And, that's where the if there's any genius or, satirical wit, it's in that. And it's like taking a classic album cover from the 60s and, replacing all those pop icons with Simpsons characters.
Oh, yeah.
Which is audacious and funny.
Yes, agreed. And I happen to love that cover and love that art, and it goes again to that thing that we were touching on in the beginning with Mad Magazine. And it was all, when I was a kid, when I was really young, weirdly enough, I learned about, because I'm 49, I learned about Watergate through Mad Magazine. That's how I became aware of that. And so there was all these little sort of things that I learned about. You hear about people that at one point in time, the people that watched The Daily Show were more informed about the news than people that watch the nightly news every night.
Yeah.
And so it's that similar thing where satire, I think, is a really wonderful way to absorb information and get introduced to it. So I was just wondering if there were any specific issues of Mad Magazine that kind of cracked your brain open when you were a kid.
The first one I remember buying, because I'd seen Mad, my brother probably had copies, and cousins and friends in the neighborhood. But the first one I remember buying had Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice.
Sure.
Was the cover feature, and Alfred's in the middle. They're all in bed. Alfred's in the middle of them.
For people that don't know, that's it's a movie from 1960s, I believe, or 70s.
I think it's like 60.
It's right on the
69.
cusp. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's where they're changing partners in it, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
It was wife swapping.
Yeah.
And the issue opened, or that feature, it opens with this key party, I guess, and there's all these naked people having like a big sex party, and like everything was strategically designed. It was like the Austin Powers.
Hiding the bits.
And it was so great. But I remember as a kid reading that, going, "This is not for me. Like, I should not be looking at this." But it was available to kids, and there were things in the magazine that were totally for me. There was Don Martin, and Sergio Aragonis and Al Jaffe. But then there were like I remember reading that Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice satire, and I was like, I'm never going to be old enough to see this movie. Like, I couldn't imagine, ever seeing this movie. It's like, this is right. As a kid, you just don't think you're ever going to be that old.
No.
And but I read it, and I remember, like, there's a lot of it I didn't get, but there was some of it that I did get and I thought was funny. But I remember thinking, someday I'll get this. Someday I will get these jokes that I don't understand. And I aspired to get the jokes. And so when I became editor-in-chief at Mad, that was one of the things I said a lot to my editors, was because we talked a lot about, are people going to get this? Are kids going to get it? And we looked at our demographics and who was buying the magazine. And I said, when I was a kid reading Mad, and you all probably had the same experience, there was always stuff you didn't get, but you aspired to get it. And you thought, all right, I'm in junior high, or I'm in elementary school. This is obviously for my sister who's in college, but someday I'll be in college and I will get this. I still didn't think I'd ever see Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice, but I thought I might be old enough to understand the jokes.
Yeah.
So that was, that was one of those things that I remembered from my childhood, and I brought to Mad as the editor, was just trying to do things in the magazine that kids necessarily wouldn't get, but they would be drawn to in a way that would make them go, I'm going to understand this someday.
Well, it was nailed because I have a 9-year-old son that I decided, you know what, I'm going to just leave out Mad Magazine. I'm going to let him discover this in the same way that I discovered it. But now kids actually talk with their parents and they ask them questions, unlike when I was a kid. Those worlds did not, there was no personal back and forth on the entertainment that we enjoyed.
Yeah.
And so my son was looking through the Christmas issue of Mad Magazine, and there's a parody of Christmas Story in it. And he asks me what a vibrator is. And I'm, shit, let me look at this. I'm like, okay, I can't explain what a vibrator is to my 9-year-old son, so I just have to put this away. Don't tell your mom about this. Let's just move. No. It's up in the closet at this point, and it's like there's certain movies that I keep on the shelf, certain books that I keep around that I want them to discover on their own without me pushing it to them. Because when I was, 10 years old and I was reading those, I consider it to be really formative. And I want them to have that experience, but you probably don't want that experience to be guided by your old man. So, yeah.
We did a feature. This was pitched to me by one of my editors, and it was pitched to him by a writer. And it was to do a parody of the Gashly Crumb Tinies, which was the Edward Gorey primer. A is for Allison, and then blah 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 blah. But about gun violence in schools, like school shootings.
Oh wow!
And he came in, I think, assuming I was going to say no, because he came in with force, and he's like, "Bill, we have to do this. Don't say no." And I said, "Okay, I'll read it. I'll look at it."
Yeah.
And then he kept after me. Like, I think it was like low in the pile on my desk, so I wasn't getting to it right away. He's like, "We got to do this." And I read it, and I was like, at first I was like, this is really hard. There's nothing funny about this.
Yeah.
But then I thought, this is one of those things that when I took this job, I wanted to bring back to Mad, that I didn't think Mad was doing, but had been doing when I was a kid, where they did things that were about drugs and about the Vietnam War. And I thought, this is one of those things. This could be really a callback to that I think would benefit the magazine. So I said yes. He jumped up and down. And the artist that we got just nailed the style. And it was fabulous. I mean, I did interviews on NPR. And,
wow.
Yeah, it was hard hitting. And that's the kind of thing that I decided, Mad, the Mad that I grew up with, I guess everybody feels like, when they were 11, that was the best era
of course.
For Mad.
Yeah.
But, so I did too. But I really felt like that was the era that I grew up in. It was the best of goofy humor that just made you laugh, just slapstick.
Yeah.
And hard-hitting satire that really, if you did laugh at it, you'd feel guilty. And everything in between. And that's what I wanted the magazine to be. And so that was, when we did that, I thought, this is going in the right direction.
So is that one of the things that you can, because it was a short period of time, but that you look at and say, I could hang up my cleats after this one. That's a life dream. Just to fulfill.
Even though all I did was say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I was very proud of that, and still am. I think every time there's a school shooting, just this past couple of days, you could put that out on the internet and it's relevant. People would read it. And
I really wish that type of material wasn't as salient and evergreen, but it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. And again, having a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old, it's literally every time there's a alarm that goes off on your phone that's about weather or something like that, the first thing that you think about as a parent is there's been a school shooting.
Yeah.
There's been something has happened. You get something, a notification from the school, the email, is it on lockdown? And it's just, it's no way to live.
And the hope was, even when we did that in Mad, after countless other school shootings that went before, you think, well, maybe this will be something that'll move the marker a little bit and get us closer to the way things should be. And I don't think it did. I'm sure it didn't. But, I don't know, maybe if there's more of that stuff out there.
You plant that seed in the right 11-year-old's mind, though, and they're able to recognize the absurdity of it and the tragic nature of it. And, how serious it is, obviously, but also understand that it's something that we can change. And that if you get enough of those 11-year-olds, eventually a generation, 2 generations from now, the needle does start to move.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I want to go back to your earlier question about Mad versus the Beatles and what my feeling was about the gravitas of that, the responsibility. Because with Mad, again, like when I was offered the job, it was at a lunch, and Dan DiDio, who was the publisher, DC co-publisher, I didn't know why he was asking me to lunch. I'd kind of put it out there that I was looking for, some work, extra work. And so I thought maybe they were going to let me write or draw Looney Tunes or something. And he starts talking about Mad Magazine. He's talking about how the guys in New York, when DC moved from New York to Burbank, the mandate was that the whole company would move, and Mad's part of that. And the guys in New York dug in their heels and said, "No, we're not moving. We're New Yorkers, and Mad's a New York magazine, and we're staying." So there was like a clash. And eventually DC said, "Okay, we'll put you up in some offices for the time being, but we're going to have to find somebody in LA to take over if this is really how you feel." And so they did. It took 2 years, but Dan found me just because I had sent him an email saying I'd like to pick up some extra work. And by the way, if you have anything permanent, I'd be interested in hearing about it.
Yeah.
So right away he invites me to lunch, and I have no idea why. And he starts talking about this, and I'm like, where is he going with this? And then little by little, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to offer me the job of editor-in-chief of Mad Magazine. Isn't he? Is he? Wait a minute, really? Is this happening? And so I'm trying to play it cool. I'm just, listening and nodding my head. And inside, like my inner 11-year-old is just like,
of course,
vibrating. And so finally he asked me. And I said, yeah, absolutely, I would love that. And I had to meet Diane Nelson, who was the president of DC at the time. And she loved Mad. She was like Mad's biggest cheerleader. And she told me, she said, frankly, Mad is kind of on the chopping block, and we need to reinvigorate it. And that's why we're hiring you. We want you to basically Mad, they know from subscriptions, because subscriptions are the biggest part of Mad's revenue. They know from those, like all that data, that Mad was read by primarily 11 to 16-year-old boys and 45 to 60-year-old men, mostly white, very few females, very few other non-white.
This is surprising at all.
Yeah. And, nobody in that middle part, college age or young adult.
Well, sure, you go out, you start your life, you go to college, have some kids, and then you say, what did I like when I was young? And then you go back to Mad.
Or you have kids and you're like, I want to introduce my kids.
That's how it happened
to Mad
for me.
Magazine. Yeah. So they said, we want you to, and we have this huge subscriber base. They kept stressing that. They said, so we want you to make the magazine relevant to women, to non-white ethnicities, all those people in the hammock, that aren't reading Mad between age 16 and 45. But we don't want to lose a single subscriber. So you gotta reinvent it and change it. But the people who love it now and have loved it for years and don't want it broken, you can't lose any of those people.
Completely redefine it.
Yeah.
Don't piss anybody off.
Right.
Easy mandate. No problem.
So I'm usually not this like, I don't know what the word is, but I conjured like an analogy in my head. That doesn't always happen with me.
Okay.
I'm usually just more of a straightforward thinker, but I likened it to somebody giving me a Fabergé egg, telling me it's full of silly putty, and telling me you need to get the silly putty out of this egg, but you can't break it. That's what it felt like.
It's amazing. What a beautiful way of putting that. That's incredible. It's so perfect for Mad Magazine, the egg, everything. That's amazing.
Yeah, and so that's what it was like. It was like, how do I do this? How do I, how do I embrace the long-time diehard Mad fans and give them what they want, but also bring in a new audience that in such a way that's not going to piss off those people who already love it and cherish it. So the first thing I did was, I had to hire a new staff. And so, I tried to be really careful about bringing in younger people,
Sure.
Bringing in women, tried to hire some non-white writers and editors, but nobody applied. So, I didn't know what to do there.
Sure.
But we built, I think, a pretty good crew of people there were people from stand-up comedy, and so I think we had a really good crew. So I had a lot of good input as to what these other groups would like, that we were trying to attract. And then I was the, kind of the barometer for the diehard Mad fan. Like, sure. I knew what those people wanted.
Yeah.
Because that was what I wanted. So I think we struck a good balance, and miraculously, the diehard Mad fans, any feedback I got was always like, this is great. You guys are, we love that you brought this back, that you brought that back. We don't mind the wokeness of this other stuff you're doing. Nobody ever said that, but that was like
at that point, that probably wasn't the term that people were using for it.
I don't think it was. No.
But it kind of reminds me of watching the Grammys or putting on a popular music radio station where there might be a thing here or there that I get, but a lot of it is going to be outside because Mad Magazine should be redefined every couple of years. It should be switching over and speaking to that new audience in a way that's going to alienate some, but then embrace others. And that's great. That's what anything that's going to stay relevant and alive has to redefine itself on a regular clip to some degree, and not just be the thing recycled over and over and over again that you want to see, as we see with anything in pop culture, be it, science fiction, video games, whatever your flavor happens to be. There's people that have very specific parameters and rules that they say for this thing that they love. It has to be this. But as a fan of that stuff, one of my favorite things that happens is when I'm wrong, when somebody shows me the potential in something that I didn't see. And I think you're somebody who tries to do that and pushes that, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Taking on something like gun violence in Mad Magazine, they probably hadn't done anything even remotely close to that in a long time, but that's harkens back to when you discovered it, and I think that's just important.
I know they did, because we actually pulled, whenever we had a social media presence, and whenever there was something happening, like a school shooting, we could sometimes go into the archives from the past 10 years, and we would find things that they did, that the New York crew did. But it was, I don't remember any of it being as hard-hitting as what we did and as humorless as what we did. It still had an element of wise guy to it, whereas the Ghastly Gun Tinies, that's what we called that article, Ghastly Gun instead of Ghastly Crumb. That you could read through that and be in tears by the end. There wasn't anything funny about it. So I think that was the difference. You know, it wasn't that Mad wasn't addressing things that were happening in the culture. It's just that they were still kind of doing it with a wise guy attitude.
Well, I remember while you're saying that, I was thinking about one that I read when I was a kid. It was on the China Syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a lot of like 3 Mile Island stuff in there. And that's a very serious subject to talk about, but it was something that was handled in a way that wasn't head on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like what you were talking about before, where there was some of I got the jokes, I get some of it, but then there's the more political stuff that is just passing me by when I'm 11, 12 years old
Mm-hmm.
and come around to that. I think it just deeply informed who I am as a person today. And I know we're over time at this point, and I feel bad, but I could talk to you for hours on this, man. So thank you so much for doing this.
You're
today.
welcome.
I really appreciate it. So
It's
thank
been
you,
my
man.
pleasure. Thanks.